he points out climate change, he points out weapons of mass destruction. He would probably include today out of control AI systems. Our problems are global problems, which means we can't really just handle in our little tribe, but that's how we've been evolved, according to him, is just to think in those terms. So he says, we are unfit for the future, and we basically need to do something drastic to get us in a better state. So he says,
before we get to our clip, do us a favor and click subscribe and that bell button below. 2/3 of people who watch us regularly aren't yet subscribed, and it really supports the channel when you do subscribe. It's free, costs nothing, and I really appreciate it. Morality is interesting. So as we continue to grow cognitively, we have a greater capacity for evil, say. Presumably the architects of this transhumanist universe are going to want to embed some form of morality. But it seems to me like, speaking of reductionist, we've so greatly reduced morality to merely not interfering with another's autonomy. That's really all we mean. Nature doesn't come into account intrinsically. Evil acts presumably are set aside. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so there are some really interesting proposals for moral enhancement as part of this project. Julian Savulescu, who for many years ran the Hero Center of Practical Ethics at Oxford University, has been writing about this theme. He's moved to a university in Singapore, but I spent a lot of time at Oxford. And he wrote a whole book years ago called Unfit for Humanity, or Unfit for the Future, Unfit for the Future. And in Unfit for the Future, he basically says, look, we have evolved in a certain way. And over the course of our evolutionary history, it was really helpful for us to survive by working together in a small little tribe.
Yeah.
But the world is so much different now. We live in this globalized reality, and all of the big threats to the world are global problems. So he points out climate change, he points out weapons of mass destruction. He was writing about this already a decade ago, so he would probably include today out of control AI systems, right? So our problems are global problems, which means we can't really just handle in our little tribe, but that's how we've been evolved, according to him, is just to think in those terms. So he says, we are unfit for the future. And we basically need to do something drastic to get us in a better state. So he says, okay, we need to invest seriously in cognitive enhancement so that we can free ourselves of all the prejudice and the bias that often affects our moral judgments negatively. And we also need to invest in emotional mood enhancements to help motivate us to actually do the good, right? Because plenty of people maybe know the good. We often know the good, but we can't find the motivation to do it. So we need that emotional boost. Plus, he thinks that we need the emotional bond and connection with other people to collaborate with them. Otherwise, we're just going to focus on ourselves selfishly. Now, to his credit, he's very clear. Look, we haven't seen this work. Like, this hasn't worked yet. We don't have special moral enhancement approaches at the pharmaceutical level or the level of gene editing or through any other technique. So he's not saying we've achieved this, but he's saying this is our only hope, basically. And so there are some interesting proposals, right? You take like oxytocin, right? The so-called cuddle, cuddle hormone, right? The cuddle drug. And so you increase oxytocin with the hope of, oh, then people will be less selfish, more inclined to bonding, more inclined to altruism. But it turns out that usually when we increase the oxytocin in these experiments, people are indeed more open and have a stronger sense of collaboration with their in-group. But there's a greater tendency, kind of a xenophobia, right?
Yeah.
A suspicion of people who are not in that small in-group. So yeah, it may help bonding at a small level, but remember, we're looking for a global altruism. We're looking for a collaboration at a global scale. So it doesn't seem like what we're doing now in terms of these pharmacological approaches, say increasing oxytocin or other experiments, is necessarily going to really give us the desired results. So that's just like at the level of scientific feasibility. There are questions of whether this is feasible. Doesn't seem like it's feasible now, and it may never be. But then there are the deeper philosophical questions. Who decides morality? Like, what does it mean to live a good life?
We're already thinking this, aren't we, with generated AI, when you ask questions about morality? Who's embedding these things into AI, if anybody?
Right. Yeah.
I think there was a point where you could ask AI to tell you a joke about a man, and then maybe it wouldn't give you a joke about a woman, for example.
Oh, right,
or you could
right.
say something about certain races, but it wouldn't say something about other races.
Right.
So if that is the case, then who's interfering with that? And then you put that on this massive scale. What does that look like?
Right, exactly. So we have to decide the correct morality. Some people say, well, look, a person needs to have enough proper moral formation to even design the moral enhancement, but the moral enhancement is there to bring about proper moral motivation. So they say, well, there may be some limits there. But I think the deeper question is, who is deciding the right morality? Like, do we all need to be Kantians? Do we all need to be utilitarians?
Yeah.
Can we make everyone a Thomist, right? And so who decides the morality? And it's really difficult because a lot of these thinkers, Savulescu included, are very upfront about their neutrality when it comes to metaphysics and their neutrality when it comes to objective morality. They say, it is not our place. They're very good disciples of Mill, of John Stuart Mill. This idea of political liberalism, of society is there to allow for a free range of different lifestyles. It's not the role of anyone to decide which lifestyle is objectively superior or inferior. We just leave the space, and the limiting factor is harm. Of course, harm itself is a pretty charged notion, and the definition of that harm, I think, always implies a metaphysics, an anthropology, and an ethics. So I don't think we ever escape the dilemma, we ever escape the difficulty, and I just do not think it's possible to be neutral. But they present themselves as being very neutral, so the question becomes, okay, who then decides what this moral enhancement looks like?